I was in one of the blackest camp, that is Takwa detention camp in Manda Island. In these detention camps, we had very, very hard life. We were denied sufficient food. We were denied medical care. We were beaten every morning. These bits of every morning was called by colonialists breakfast. When I was a strategist for the Mau Mau freedom struggle mass movement, I was arrested in 1963. And I was taken to Athi River detention camp. After a while in Athi River detention camp, I was taken to Lodwar detention camp in Turkana district. After a while in Turkana district, I was transferred to Takwa detention camp in Manda Island, in Lamu. After that, when they decided to give independence to this country, for this country, I was taken to Dhiba camp. It was called Dhiba Works Camp, the most dangerous camp, where people were killed like flies. But God saved me. I was then put to another camp in my area called Barisho Releasing Detention Camp. This is how I went. In these detention camps, we had very, very hard life. We were denied sufficient food. We were denied medical care. We were beaten every morning. These bits of every morning was called by colonialists breakfast. Being beaten by colonialists in the prisons was being called breakfast. An officer would wake up and ask the warder, "Have they taken breakfast?" And he would shout and say, "Yes, very early. They have taken their already breakfast." That means you were beaten very early in the morning the way they wanted you to be beaten. Others who have broken their arms, their legs. Others are sleeping in the barrack because they were perhaps beaten to unconsciousness. This kind of things. Therefore, in detention camp, life was hard, very hard. But we kept our promise to liberate Kenya from dictatorship and subjugation.
You mentioned you moved to about 8 detention camps. You were saying that when there was counting. Why were you being transferred from one detention camp to another?
Yeah. They were the traitors, the loyalists, and the home guards were to follow us into detention camps. To do what? To interrogate us and get confessions from us. That is why we have to be beaten so that we can confess. What were we required to confess? If you were a Mau, Gitu wa Kahengeri, if you were a Mau Mau, and that is why you were brought here in detention camp, can you confess what you did? How many people did you kill? How many askari did you knock down and snatched his bunduki so that to be used by the freedom fighters? All these confessions we were required to confess. If you refuse to confess, you are categorized as a black man, a black detainee. Then they will have now to make arrangement for you to be transferred into a more notorious camp in the country. Some were even taken into Lake Victoria, a place called Mageta, a place called Sayusi. Others who were put into McKinnon Road, others in Manyane, others in Manda Island. I was in one of the blackest camp, that is Takwa detention camp in Manda Island. The reason for me to go there is that I was heard. I did not confess anything. I did not tell home guards or royalists any secret about the Mau Mau. And because I was a strategist, I was in the best way of giving them the information. When I refused, then I have to be taken into a very serious detention camp. And that's how it was done amongst other my colleagues in the Mau Mau movement.
Wow. So there's some fighters who eventually gave some secrets
Confess.
and they were released, yes?
Yes, certainly. After people being beaten in that way, there were some people who said, sorry, I cannot die because of Muma. I must tell you what happened. You see? And then some of them were released before us. Some of them were given food, enough food. Some of them were given medical services. But those who did not confess were left to die the way they can die. If they die of hunger, let them die. If they die of diseases, let them die. If they die of beating, let them die. That was the way we were treated by colonial government, along with their loyalists, collaborators, and traitors.
How did you survive?
Lack of God. God said no. And where God has said no, nobody to say yes.
There was an incident when you were being transferred to Manda Island.
Yes.
With your father. Tell us about that.
Yes. My father was a freedom fighter. He was a freedom fighter before me for many years. He recruited me into freedom fighting. When I was arrested, he was left behind. But later, he was also arrested and brought to Athi River, where I was. We stayed together in Athi River until we were separated by him being taken to Manyane and I being taken to Lodwar. When we were staying in different detention camps, then one day it happened that they wanted to move me from Lodwar to Mad Island. Then I was brought from Lodwar by road transport to Kitale. In Kitale, I took a train. I was not alone. We were about over 70 people. Then when we were put in the train, we came to Nairobi. We slept in Nairobi, and then in the morning we started a journey now to go to Fort Jesus in Mombasa. In Voi, when we reached Voi, the train stopped at Voi. When I was in the coach, inside the coach, together with my other detainees and a warder, I heard European people saying outside the coach, "Come on, Mose, come on, Mose, come on, Mose." The last voice I heard is my father being thrown into the coach by the European soldiers. And then he got to the coach where I was, and I was sitting near the door. My father fell onto my laps. And then he was pushed inside the coach by the askari to the other detainees, because other detainees were there. Because I was a leader in detention camp. Therefore, they asked me to sit near the askari, because if they wanted tell him something, they convey that information to me, and then I tell him. When he was pushed there, my other detainees started interrogating him. And he said, "My name is Kahengeri wa Gitu." And they caught the name Gitu wa Kahengeri. I said, "Kahengeri wa Gitu, Kahengeri wa Gitu, yes." And my son is detained in Lodwar detention camp. He is telling other detainees. Oh. Then one of the detainees came and told me, "Do you know the old man who was pushed into the truck is your father? He is telling us there inside that he is Kahengeri wa Gitu." Then I turned, I went, and then I found I did not recognize my father. He did not even recognize me, because we were weak, very weak, dehydrated, and all this kind of jail. Then we greeted each other and said, "Fine, let us go." We went to Fort Jesus. We slept in Jesus. Early in the morning, we were taken in a boat called the Rosalindi. Here is where my father was being pushed into And further on is the boat in which we were together with my father and other detainees. Then we were in the boat in the sea. In the beginning of the sea, of the journey, we could continue seeing the dry land until we went right inside the ocean, where sharks were coming out of the sea, bringing their heads up like that, and then they go back. Then at that time, I asked my father, "My father, do you think these enemies have brought us in the sea so that they can put us into the sea, we die in the sea?" My father told me, "Don't worry, Morio." In Kikuyu, Morio means my son. Morio, do not mind. Even if they kill us, we are fighting for our country. Let us continue. If they kill us, we get finished. If they don't kill us, we will go home. That is how the episode of my father happened when I was going from Lodwar to Takwa. And then we were taken to Manda Island together. We stayed there about 4 years together in the same compound, sleeping on 2 mats next to each other. When I was waking in the morning, I looked at my right, it was my father. When he looked at his right, it is his son, until the day came when the colonial government decided to hand over the land, country, to its owners. That is when we were released.
Before the incident with your father, so that you went to Manda Island together, as you mentioned, he was a freedom fighter even before. So was he among the Mau Mau leaders as well? Because you said he's the one who recruited you into freedom fighting.
Yes. When Mau Mau is a mass organization. Every leader anywhere in the country was a leader of the Mau Mau. All the people who participated in liberating this country, they are members of the Mau Mau liberation struggle mass movement. So my father was in one of them. I was one of them. Any other freedom fighter was one of them. Mekatilili Wameza was one of them.